Welcome, everyone. I see our gallery is full, and I want to thank everyone for your presence here today. Thank you, council and staff. And we will now call the meeting to order. It is 1 p.m. I would ask at this time if council has any added items to the agenda. Seeing none, thank you. We will move down now for adoption of previous minutes, and I'd ask consent for the March 11th, 2024 minutes. Sorry. Okay. Yep. We've got a long agenda here, and I'm getting a little too fast. Sorry, folks. Okay, I would ask council for a motion, please, for adoption of the agenda. Deputy Mayor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that we adopt the agenda as presented for Monday, March 25th, regular council meeting and closed council meeting agendas in the council chambers.
Thank you to Deputy Ryan. I'll now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Item 2A, consent for March 11th, 2024 minutes. We're all good? Very good. We have consent then for March 11th, 2024 minutes. Item 3, page 5 of the agenda, 3A, is Bylaw 2024, Land Use Bylaw, and it's with regards to a rezoning. We will be having a public hearing for this. Before we start that, CEO Williams, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just before opening the public hearing and inviting our Land Use Planner Kyle Sloan up to say a few words. This went to first reading last month, and with the 30-day period, I believe we received 2 letters in total, both of which in support. So with that, I think if we open the hearing and first invite Kyle up to introduce, we can get started.
Thank you very much. Municipal Land Use Planner Kyle Sloan, and I will now start the public hearing. Prior to, I have some interest for municipal councillors. If you have a pecuniary interest, you are to disclose that you have an interest and its general nature. You are to abstain from any decision of the matter from voting. You are to leave the room until the matter has been dealt with, and you should make sure that your abstention is recorded in the minutes. You are not to be discriminated against participation. I declare the public hearing open at 1:02 p.m. And at this time, I do ask Mr. Sloan to explain the purpose and the effect of the proposed bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Bylaw 2024-12 is a proposed amendment to the land use bylaw specific to the property located at 5200 58th Street from urban reserve to the R4 district, which is for manufactured homes. This is to accommodate a new residential development of prefabricated factory-built dwelling units. The parcel is located within the Uptown Olds Area Redevelopment Plan. The land use concept map in this plan identifies the parcel for future medium to high density residential development, while policy 4.2.2 of the same plan states that medium to high density housing is envisioned north of 54th Street and lower density housing south of 54th Street, where this is located. Neither the policy nor the map specify a land use district. They speak in more general terms, but administration believes that the R4 district is in between the lowest density districts and the highest density, which is R3, and it is appropriate for this site and in compliance with the plan. This bylaw received first reading on February 26, 2024. And the public hearing for this bylaw was advertised in the local paper for two issues of the paper prior to today. To date, two comments or letters of support were received, both in favor of this application. that's it for information for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. I believe we do have gallery members that do wish to speak, so I will have to explain the procedure. Presentations before council shall be brief and to the point. Council shall not allow cross-examination of persons giving information, and it will not be necessary for the persons giving information to verify his or her qualifications. Council may ask questions of the speakers after each presentation for clarification. No debating or questions from the floor will be allowed, and no written submissions will be received by council after this public hearing. For persons addressing council, which I believe we will start with, please indicate who you're speaking on behalf of, your client, company, or a citizens group, and we will start for the first time for those in support. Mr. Carpenter? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council and Olds. I come to you today as President of the Olds Regional Exhibition, and I just want to speak in favor of this application, and I would like to formally welcome Blair Robertson, who is the principal of Totangi Properties, pardon me. And I think that what we would say at Olds Regional Exhibition and on behalf of the board is that we're fully in favor of this development. We believe the need for transition housing in this community is great. Our 4 zoning is going to support that. And we also believe that the developers that are in this community now have done a stellar job of building our community in the housing, but there is a bit of a gap. And we believe that this development will address that gap and will also support the needs that have been identified in our community around housing to support jobs in the economy and trade that are happening in our community. And so I'd like to really voice my support for Blair and this project, and I hope that council and the community would rally behind this new venture and new opportunity. For us at the regional exhibition, this is also going to mean an injection of money and puts us in a very strong financial position on a piece of land that we have not been using. And so with that, I just hope that the council and the community would get behind this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Are there any others in support? Second time. Yes, sir, or madam. Please approach the podium and address your name.
Okay, my name is Tawn Towns, and I'm here to represent my mother and myself, Carly Cole. We are the property owners on the west side of the east side of the piece that's being discussed. And we certainly don't have a problem with a new land development there. And we just have some questions that we would like to have entered into record and then discussions with the developer on. Where will the primary proposed access be? It looks like it might be along 53rd Avenue, but that would be something we'd be interested in knowing so we can make plans on our land if need be. Second question is, what are the plans for suitable fence line between the properties? Since we have some horses there, that gets into the issue of being a safety issue for both parties concerned. We would also like to have a discussion regarding some sort of a suitable privacy screen, maybe a hedgerow or trees or something along that area, just to maintain some of our privacy so that we just have a bit of privacy and cut down on noise. The last item that we would like to have looked into in discussions, which I'm sure will be unfolding as things progress, would be the watershed, directing of the watershed. Currently the water comes off the railroad tracks to the north, to the south of our property, and is run through a ditch towards the west. And if that ditch is disturbed or stopped, then the water continues on down the railroad tracks and floods our land. So that would be just something in the discussions that we would appreciate having talked about. Thank you.
Excuse me, would you like to leave a copy with our legislative
Yes.
clerk of your questions?
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to speak? Okay, our CEO would like to speak to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and thank you for the questions. Since it's just rezoning, we won't address specific development concerns right now. Certainly, there's more of the conceptual use of the land, but those questions are something we are all aware of, and we're trying to mitigate right now. To touch on very briefly, yes, 53rd Avenue is the primary entry egress point. We do have that shared alleyway, I understand, to your property, which we do have to work out further on. The watershed, certainly we have been engaged with that water course for several years now, both through ORE and with the Miller Meadows development. We do have a federal grant application underway just to deal with that, and plus our engineers have been engaged, so we're well aware. Fencing, privacy screens will come during development, so I don't have great answers right now, but certainly we want to make this as conducive as possible to all adjacent landowners. So thank you for the questions, and we'll certainly be in touch should this progress into the development phase. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a section in our public hearing for persons deemed to be affected by. If you prefer to, I will open one more in support, or you could wait for the affected by. Are there any others in support? Please approach the podium.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name's Blair Robertson. I'm part owner of Tatangi Properties, and we are the developer proponent for this application. We are a developer on the west coast of Vancouver Island, where I reside and do most of our work. I just want to say that I came about this opportunity as my son started going to school here at the college, and I made some introductions, and I was really impressed with the community. You have a great staff to work with, and then through the Olds Regional Exhibition, we came to an agreement, and so we're really excited to advance this proposal into our next steps. We have I'm assembling a team of professionals in environmental and engineering and building and working that side out. So we will get into more of the detailed design and certainly work with our neighbors. And we've just made introductions today, and we're following up with a cup of tea. So we're very excited. Of course, I'm speaking in support of the bylaw, and we think it will help fill a gap in the housing supply. So if there's any questions that you have of me, or through your staff, we continue to talk. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Okay.
Now I will move forward, and we will ask for the first time for those opposed, if there's any in the gallery that are opposed. Seeing none, I'll go for the first time for persons deemed to be affected by this development. Seeing none, we'll move forward, and I will ask council members for comments or questions. Seeing none, I will now ask the development officer to make final comments. I believe that's Kyle. Do you have any further comments that you would like to make? Oh, very good. Thank you very much. I will now then declare the public hearing closed at 1:13 p.m. Thank you for those that have been with us today and spoke. I would now ask council, please, for a motion for second reading. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that bylaw number 2024-12 be given second reading as presented.
Thank you. I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. And third and final reading, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that bylaw number 2024-12 be given third reading as presented.
Thank you. I ask council members for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And once again, thank you all for attending our public hearing today, and I'm sure we'll have further conversation with you in the future. just give a minute to clear the room for those that wish to stay, and for those that carry on, have a safe journey. Very good. We'll carry on. Page 19, please, of your agenda. This is bylaw 2024-13, land use bylaw amendment for secondary suites. We will be having a public hearing, and so I'll just move forward into the public hearing. We can speak there. I call the public hearing, oh, sorry, I do have to read to you. Well, I've already read to my council members already the preview of what the pecuniary interest is, so I'll just move ahead into the public hearing. So I declare the meeting open at 1:16 p.m. And at this time, I would ask then, Mr. Sloan, will you be speaking once again? Thank you. Municipal Land Use Planner, Mr. Sloan.
Thank you again. This land use bylaw amendment was initiated by administration. This coincides with town initiatives to encourage owners of, or it began with our initiatives to encourage owners of unpermitted secondary suites to legalize those suites with development permits, to bring them into compliance with both our bylaws and municipal building code, or provincial building codes. A number of inquiries that we received following that were from owners of duplexes where they had secondary suites in the basement, so there are a total of 4 dwelling units on the property. Currently, the Town of Olds Land Use Bylaw does not allow for the approval of suites in duplexes, but this is something that the Provincial Building Code does allow. So this amendment, part of this amendment is to add, to remove the restriction so that for suites to only be allowed in on properties with detached dwellings, and to allow them in properties with duplexes, to bring our bylaws into alignment with the provincial regulations. Another amendment proposed here is changing the types of suites and increasing flexibility for the types of suites that are allowable in the R2 land use district. Currently, secondary suites in the R2 district are only allowed when contained within the principal dwelling. So no detached suites, no suites over a detached garage, essentially only basement suites are allowed. Whereas the detached suites and all other types of secondary suites are allowed in the R1 land use district and in the narrow lot R2 district, but not specifically in the R2 district. So the second part of this is to bring the R2 district suite regulations to match them with the other districts. The proposed amendment would simplify our regulations, allow more flexibility for the people who are inquiring to try to legalize their existing suites, and allow us to inspect them and make sure that they are compliant with building codes and safe for inhabitants. That's it for my information until second reading, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Before moving forward, I would like to ask the remaining members in the gallery if any persons are here to address this public hearing. Thank you. Seeing none then, I will go right down to ask council members for comments or questions. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to Development Officer Sloan. On the definition of fourplex, how does this difference between having suites in the basement of duplexes as compared to what is designated as a fourplex?
Yes, thank you for the question, and through the mayor. The provincial building code does not allow suites in duplexes, and the difference between a duplex with secondary suites, and a fourplex, which is what we had previously done in some cases to bring these properties into compliance, is that a duplex with secondary suite can be subdivided down the middle so that on the titled parcel, there is one main dwelling and then a suite underneath. Fourplex does not allow for that sort of secondary suite. It could be condominiumized into 4 different titled units with a common property, but the provincial building code doesn't allow suites in fourplexes. So that's the main difference. It's about how it is registered with land titles, essentially.
Thank you. Any other questions? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. You may be seated, and I will seeing no more further questions, I then declare the public hearing closed at 1:20 p.m. And I would ask for a council member for second reading. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the bylaw number 2024-13 be given second reading as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Third and final reading. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that bylaw number 2024-13 be given third reading as presented.
Thank you. I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. We will now move to page 23 of our agenda. And this will be in regards to bylaw 2024-11, amendment to the land use bylaw. Okay, CAO Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and Kyle is back here as well to add to the mechanics of first reading. So this was brought up again by administration after several conversations with council around what we were hearing from developers, largely developers interested in building multi-unit apartment complexes in Olds. And while it's never necessarily the role or the fault of the municipality that things don't get built, I believe there are things that we could do to better facilitate a higher density residential construction, largely focused on that rental market, through both making our regulations more efficient, but also matching those of comparable municipalities. So the 3 primary topics here we're looking for council to consider, give first reading today, then consider with public engagement through the hearing and subsequent readings, involves parking, height restrictions, and green space requirements. After reviewing Olds' position, not just within our own land use districts and how some of the rules differed, but more so to other municipalities around us, everywhere from Morinville to Innisfail to Airdrie. We felt that these 3 items were more onerous on the developer, therefore increasing development costs and therefore increasing both the price of units for rent or purchase, should those be built, but certainly increasing the unlikelihood of them being built for such regulations. And Kyle can speak more specifically to those. The other matters more involve the definitions around what we consider apartments, and that's to hopefully bring forward more interest in what I would call residential conversions, commercial to residential conversions, which we don't have any in front of council for today, but hopefully through relaxing some of these definitions around apartments and multiplexes, that soon council will see some ideas from private sector developers and current property owners of how we could make better use of existing properties in town. But with that, I'll turn it over to Kyle to lead us through the rest of first reading and go from there.
Go ahead, Mr. Sloan.
Thank you. Yes, as the CAO said, almost all of these regulations have stemmed from conversations the administration has had with developers. We feel that if approved, these regulations, these amendments could result in dozens or even into the triple digits number of new units being built in Olds. And most of these would be 1 and 2 bedroom units, which in the housing assessment and the survey was the most undersupplied and in demand type of dwelling in town. So there are a series of 6 specific amendments related to residential development, and then one that came up through mixed-use development that we are in conversations with pertaining to daycares. But I will go through each proposed amendment. So the first one is reducing the landscaping requirement in the R3 district, the medium-density residential district. Currently, it is the only district that requires that 30% of the parcel area be landscaped. On larger parcels, this tends to not be an issue because they have plenty of land for landscaping. The town has a number of smaller R3 parcels that the combination of a 30% requirement for landscaping plus our current parking requirements mean that those parcels have been borderline undevelopable from a financial standpoint. The second piece is increasing the height limit in both the R3 district and the highway commercial district. Currently in the highway commercial districts, both CH and CHA, there's a height limit of 10 meters, and the proposal is to change that to 22 meters, which has been approved in the past in the highway commercial with the credit union office building. And would allow for up to 6 stories for mixed-use development. And the R3 height limit right now for apartment buildings is quite complex or difficult to understand, even though it's a single line. It's 13.5 meters, or the lesser of 4 stories, or I think it's 15 meters or something. So essentially, you can have a 3-story building that's 13.5 meters, or you can add a 4th floor, but only if it's under a certain height. So bringing that into just a flat number of the 22 meters, again, would allow for up to 6-floor building. And that would, there are other regulations at play that would limit that, so we wouldn't necessarily see buildings that are too large for the parcel because there are still parking requirements, there are still landscaping requirements. We're not getting rid of those entirely. The third does relate to parking requirements. Right now, we have a blanket parking requirements for apartments at 1.75 stalls per unit. Again, many of the units that we are seeing proposed or brought to our attention would be 1 and 2 bedroom units. And many municipalities in our research broke this down. Instead of just having X stalls per dwelling, they break it down to by bedroom. So the proposal is to change that, and these numbers are seem to be very common throughout Alberta and other municipalities of 1 parking stall for 1 bedroom unit in studios, 1.25 for 2 bedrooms, and then 3 bedrooms and up would be 1.5 stalls per unit. The fourth proposed amendment is adding apartments and multiplex as discretionary uses in the highway commercial districts. This has come from some discussions. We recently, just in 2023, added these uses as discretionary uses, added mixed use as discretionary uses in the highway commercial districts. There are some inquiries about, as the CAO mentioned, converting some underutilized commercial buildings to multiplexes or apartments, but we currently can't allow that at all. So adding it as a discretionary use means we still do have some control over where and how this would be approved, but it would allow us to at least approve it on a case-by-case basis. 5 is similar in adding apartments and multiplexes as permitted uses in the central commercial district. In the Uptown Olds ARP, which is where all of our central commercial zoning is, the area redevelopment plan speaks to allowing higher density residential on the outskirts of the main commercial core of town. Currently, this is discretionary, so, and we are getting interest from developers to build such units in the C1 district. But right now, each and every application would have to come to council. Even if it is on the outskirts of what we would consider uptown physically, it's still within this district. So changing that to permitted would allow administration to handle those applications for higher density residential in the uptown core. The sixth one is changing the definition of multiplex, simply because it currently specifies that a multiplex has between 3 and 8 dwelling units. We have had some conversations, some interest in 10 plexes, and that doesn't match a definition in our bylaw. It doesn't exist in town. So just changing the definition to say 3 or more units would essentially not change the types of developments, but would allow more flexibility for the scale. The amendment that doesn't relate specifically to residential did come to us from somebody looking to develop a mixed-use ground floor commercial with residential up top type development with a daycare in the ground floor. They did the calculations with our current requirements for daycare, which requires a number of parking stalls per student or per child that is in their care, and they would be required to have 30 parking stalls for that daycare. And those parking stalls would have to be there throughout the day, despite the fact that daycare stalls are pick up and drop off in the morning. Of course, they do still have staff, so the proposed change is to still require permanent parking stalls for the staff, but but remove the requirement for those permanent parking stalls for students. So the recommendation is that bylaw 2024-11 be given first reading as presented, and that Monday, April 22nd, 2024 at 1 p.m. in council chambers be set as the date, time, and place for a public hearing on the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. And as you've just indicated, we are here for first reading only, and the information shared with you today, I am sure will be a separate item at a future date, which our CAO will bring to our attention. So I'm going to move forward at this time and ask for first reading of 2024-11, please. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that bylaw number 2024-11, amendment to land use bylaw 01-23 be given first reading as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. And I would like to set the public hearing date, please. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that Monday, April 22nd, 2024 at 1 p.m. in council chambers be set as the date, time, and place for a public hearing on bylaw number 2024-11.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? Opposed? You were in favor, correct? Thank you. That is carried. We are moving to page 32 at this point. It's bylaw 2024-16, and it's our panhandling bylaw. CAO Williams?
Thank you again, Mayor Dahl, and Director Andrew is with me today. He'll take over in a moment. First, apologies for the curtness of how this was presented. We certainly want to have panhandling included into what's our community standards bylaw and it's becoming the person and places bylaw, which council is yet to see first draft of. But I'm sure, as you've noticed as town residents, that we have noticed a recent spike in panhandling activities in town throughout the winter and into the spring, certainly. And Director Andrew will share a bit more on perhaps the whys and whats of that. But we felt that simple bylaw providing municipal enforcement and the RCMP with the ability to enforce panhandling in Olds is prudent to get in front of council and passed as soon as possible. So I'll let Justin say a few words and then answer any questions council may have.
Director Andrew, please do.
Thank you, CAO Williams, and through to the mayor and council. Correct. This is a tool for the toolbox for enforcement services to utilize for situations that arise that warrant response. Being brief in the background, unfortunately, we are encountering situations where there are acts going on in the community and other communities where out-of-community people are taking advantage of somewhat of the goodwill and hospitality of people in rural communities, soliciting donations of funds and money, and it creates an atmosphere of unease and discontent among residents, business owners alike. And so we need this tool in our box so that our enforcement officers can take those situations and manage them appropriately through the application of a fairly stiff fine structure to deter that kind of future behavior. I do want to preface this with the fact that when these situations occur, there is always a thorough look into what the circumstances are to try to vet whether this is a legitimate situation of somebody in need, and appropriate resources can be put in place, such as supports through various social agencies that are accredited and can deal with this type of thing and offer that support, versus the cases where it is actually a illegitimate ask and or falls to the purveyance of somebody that is looking to exploit good nature of people. So it's always enforcement's opportunity and mandate to try to offer assistance to people through the channels that are there. And we want to emphasize that we have great supports in this community, such as the food bank and other social services that are very capable of helping people in need. So this isn't the fact that we do not want to help or we will not. That is always the first mandate. So with that, this is the tool that we are requesting for your consideration.
Thank you. I know you are asking possibly for all readings today. So prior to that, if there's any questions from my council, I know I have one. I'll allow those questions prior to. I just have one, and I'm sure I'm not speaking out of order. I just know that we're a very vibrant community in the summertime, and after thoroughly reading this, I thought to myself, what about the musicians? What about the buskers that come in the summer that play music in our parks, etc.? I wouldn't want to be at that strict that we'd have to stop allowing these young musicians and or individuals to bring a festival type scene to our community. That's all that came to my mind. So for consideration. Councillor Walsh?
Yeah, I've done a fair bit of research on this. I'm not going to support this bylaw. This is not how a bylaw should come to council. We should have the numbers, the incidents. We're taking a situation that is not illegal in Canada and making it illegal in Olds, and I'm going, that's a pretty serious bylaw that we're being asked to create. And I appreciate Director Andrews' phrasing around that, and I agree with him to a certain point, but I would much prefer to see a bylaw like this come to council with the statistics, with the incidents, what's happening. A lot of municipalities are going with the prescribed panhandling. You can't do it on private property, you can't do it in front of businesses, you can't do it around ATMs. The nature of the panhandling in Olds, I'm not familiar with. The only time I get asked for funding is when I leave a department store and they want me to donate to their favorite charity. So, you know, I will not support this today. I need that type of information to make this, it's a serious bylaw. And I just want to be sure that when my spider senses go off when we're saying for the safety of the community, I need to know what has been unsafe out in the community. So that will be my position today.
Thank you very much for your comments. Does any other council members have a comment? Deputy Mayor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dole. Well, I have seen the panhandling going on within the community out in front of a couple of different stores. In fact, 3 different stores I've been confronted about from a panhandler. So I know that it is going on out there. I wouldn't mind seeing some numbers as well, but I do support the need for it. I just have one question with regards to that. And if you put in a bylaw like this, is this enforceable by both the municipal police service that we have as well as the RCMP?
Go ahead, Director Andrew.
So I want to just back up, and I would like to propose an answer to your question, Mayor Dahl, first about buskers or community events. So again, with the application of a tool such as this bylaw, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is applied for every situation. So like community events or those kind of activities. This is one of those cases where you do have to have legislation in place that can be enacted if the situation warrants. And again, when officers are enforcing any circumstance, it is always to their discretion as to how far that they push that enforcement, but they have to have teeth behind their action. They can't say you can't be here and you can't do this if there is actually no law against it. So again, it is always up to them to decide how that's applied. The other conversation regarding numbers and statistics, that's a difficult one for us to give because we're not receiving phone calls in a numerous capacity reporting these kind of activities simply because there is no law against it. So right now it's a hard investigation to mount simply because it's not against the law. We have no bylaw, no provision. So the one thing that we are seeing is we're hearing from community members where this kind of activity through a select group of people is becoming increasingly forward and obtrusive. So it is specific people in coming from outside of our community that are starting to press patrons of certain stores, and it's typically around grocery stores, high traffic areas such as in the Cornerstone development. And so as far as safety goes, the reality is that people just want to feel that their personal space is not invaded upon when they go to purchase things like groceries or do that physical business. And when they start to get questioned by people about why can't you give me some money, you obviously bought groceries, you can afford to give me some money, it starts to change your feeling of and perception of the experience of just going to the grocery store. And again, it is a very difficult situation, and it's certainly one that's not taken lightly. And that's why, again, the premise is that assistance is there to be offered to everybody, and that's always first and foremost. We've had situations in the past where individuals have been soliciting for financial assistance in these locations, and we have allocated resource to go and invest to talk to them, to offer assistance, to give them rides, to hook them up with social services. And of course, at all those times, it is denied, and usually they move on because that's what they choose to do. So hopefully that answers some of the question that was raised there.
Thank you, Director Andrew. You have satisfied my question. We have a question from Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And just a comment and then a question. I do like the idea of statistics, but I do hear and understand Director Andrew's comment around the difficulty with those statistics. I think overall I do like and support this bylaw. To use Director Andrews' words of being another tool in the toolbox. Perhaps I'm maybe overly trusting of our law enforcement people, but I would expect them to use judgment on a case-by-case situation and basis and not incarcerating everybody and anybody that they come across. But I do like the idea of being proactive. This can get into aggressiveness to the general public in terms of the panhandling. So again, if it's viewed in my mind as a tool with some teeth, I think I can generally support it. My question is on page 35, if you could just explain to me how points 7 and 8 work, because I understand point 7 talks about a tiering based on offenses, but then point 8 references if you're guilty of an offense, you have a $2,500 fine or whatever, which in all these cases, I'm not sure a panhandler would be able to pay the fine, but can you talk to me how 7 and 8 work on page 35? Thank you.
Yeah, so, Municipal Clerk, could we scroll up to 35 just to show for everybody to follow through? So part of the penalty section in the bylaw is there are requirements, and this is how it marries up with provincial offenses. So when a municipal bylaw penalty is implemented, what the process that we have in place is that it's penalty in lieu of prosecution. So typically municipal bylaws are assigned a lower value fine, and if a party that's issued that citation pays it, then it's a lower dollar amount. It's an admission of guilt, essentially, with no further consequence. It's no criminal record or any other kind of pecuniary type issue. But when they choose to fight the ticket, to dispute it in court, then it gets elevated to a provincial citation. And typically at that point, those dollar values are higher. And it's because it helps go towards covering the provincial court costs and processing through their administration. And so that's why there is the difference of dollar figure. The ones in 7 would be our municipal numbers, and then the higher numbers in 8 would be when it comes to the provincial citation.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. One thing thank you very much, Director Andrew, for providing that information, but you didn't answer my question with regards to the enforcement part, whether or not both parties have the ability to enforce. But I also wanted to point out in number 7 there that you've got $1,005 and it's got $1,500 in the bracket, so that has to be corrected. Just to point that out to you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan, and I wasn't avoiding your question. Yes, the answer is absolutely. So the whole premise of this bylaw would be that actually the RCMP would utilize this municipal bylaw first themselves. Again, the intent is not that we're seeing these fines being issued and on a regular basis, but again, it's kind of having that big stick, is that the conversation, in my opinion, when law enforcement would engage with somebody would be, do you understand that there is a bylaw against panhandling in the town of Olds? No, I wasn't aware of that. Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to pack up and you can't proceed with that any longer. Okay, I'm sorry, away they go. Right? Or do you need social assistance? We can help you with food, we can help you with accommodation, all of those things. The big piece is when that conversation is had and somebody leaves and then the next day they come back and they're doing the same type of behavior again. And so that's when these numbers come into play and those opportunities. So again, it is difficult and it does look large. And again, this is that piece where it's very difficult because we're separating two different acts here. We're talking about people that probably have the means to pay this because they are actually taking advantage of people and taking money for nothing, versus people that truly need some help. And again, Councillor Wilson made mention that he has a high trust of law enforcement, as do I. Law enforcement is here to help people. We're not here to hurt people, and we'll always endeavor to do the right thing for people to help them. And sometimes, again, we just need an extra tool in the toolbox.
Is it supplementary? CEO Williams would like to make a comment. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just briefly, and just to reiterate what I said before, hopefully by midsummer, when council returns from break, we'll have the person and places bylaw, which this will be rolled into that. So certainly if there's any issues with its enforcement, or with its application, whatever, we could make adjustments then, if council is comfortable with how it looks now. If not, we can obviously take this back. So, but
Good comment.
there is another review mechanism automatically within the next 6 months or so.
Thank you for those comments. It's very good information. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and thank you again to Director Andrew for explaining all that, and I agree with the position. I would like to move the very first recommendation, if that's okay.
Yes, and I like the comments in the bylaw that cover the fact that this could be a help and assistant to the person that just doesn't realize that there is any too. So that portion of it I did like, and I could support this. So first reading, then go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Absolutely, and I agree with what you just said as well. So I move that council give first reading to panhandling bylaw 2024-16 as presented. Oh, sorry. As amended, because I meant made amendment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The motion is on the floor. I will call for the vote for first reading. Those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Second reading, please. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council give second reading to the panhandling bylaw 2024-16 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz. I will now call for the vote for second reading. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. You're now looking for unanimous consent for third and final reading. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that council unanimously agrees to consider a third reading of the panhandling bylaw 2024-16.
Yes, as amended. Thank you. Yes, it's on there. Thank you. Legislation clerk got that. Thank you. Very good. We have a motion on the floor for looking for consent for third and final reading. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? Opposed? It's defeated then. Thank you. Look forward to this coming back to council in the future. I would ask council at this time if you can look at new business, page 36 for victim services. And I would ask Garcia who will be speaking to this.
Thank you again, Mayor Dahl. I wanted to introduce it and then perhaps invite a guest up to do better than me. But this is a matter that's been coming, has been around for, I would dare say, up to approaching 2 years now, with the province wanting to regionalize victim services, which currently consists of about 62 local models into 4 regional ones. I'm sure you've seen it at various conventions and in the news about other municipalities taking a stand. The provincial goals here are relatively solid from the outset. They wanted to standardize financial processes, standardize some service offerings, and promote some efficiency, certainly on the administrative level. And some of those goals we certainly support, and I would say most of the 62 local victim services models would support those as well. And the reason why this is coming to council now, after, as I mentioned, nearly 2 years of being in the public domain and other municipalities taking a stand largely against it, along with our respective municipal associations on the urban and rural side, is that we were waiting to see how changes rolled out. And it's now administration's belief that those changes have been going on long enough without really any clear direction on how they may work out. So as I mentioned, Staff Sergeant Wright is here in the gallery, as is Rhonda, our local victim services lead, and we've been in conversations with them over this. And I'll invite Rhonda up in a moment as well to better explain things, as mentioned. It's important to note that these are certainly my words, and dare I say the words of Director Andrew as well, not necessarily the RCMP's nor our local victim services words. But even though there's some positive changes in the province direction, the lack of clarity, the lack of decision-making, the lack of leadership on this file is concerning at best and harmful at worst. That you can see victim services now, even in our area, let alone across the province, deteriorating or dissolving because of this lack of direction. Innisfail being the most recent example, but not the only one. And it's hard for me to understate the importance victim services has in our first responder community in Olds, largely with the RCMP, but also with Olds Fire Department. Those employees and volunteers who are again, second on scene to a lot of very difficult circumstances, supporting those people affected not just by crime, but by tragedy as well. And something that first responders are not trained to deal with, but certainly don't have the time in such situations to deal with. It's incredibly important service that we don't want to see diluted, let alone disrupted. So I'm not saying the province is going to harm the current model or it's going to do anything on purpose that's against victims of crime or tragedy, but their inaction and the lack of clarity is doing just that, I would argue. And I believe council needs to hear this now and consider a formal stance from the town of Olds. So I'm going to stop there because I always have much more to say. I will ask Rhonda if she would mind, or someone from Victim Services to come up. Just Director Andrew can add a bit more as well, but certainly any questions you may have on this, they can add to what I said, or certainly correct anything I missaid. But Justin, did you want to say anything before introducing? Okay. Well, would you please introduce yourself to council, please?
Of course. My name is Miranda Dolmage. I'm being delegated this role because I am the chair of the Victim Services Board. We are the volunteer board that governs victim services for Chinook Karch Victim Services Society, which, as I'm sure you're aware, operates out of 3 detachment areas. So we do Sundre, Olds, and Didsbury. I've been in this role for 5 years, so I've been watching how this has been rolling out. And what we're here really today is to talk about some of the services that this current model is going to actually be losing for our victims as compared to what our current model is doing for us. So we've been in place for 25 years, and we have been providing services to victims of crime and to victims of tragedy, not just in navigating the court system, but to provide general services. One of the things that we do is we provide temporary housing through the hotels in each of the municipalities. If there is something that comes up, usually a domestic abuse situation or a house fire or some tragedy that makes it impossible for a victim to remain where they are because they do not have a safe location. As you know, this area does not have a lot of shelter support. So we take advantage of lodging people temporarily, often in the Pomeroy or through whatever funding that we do. Our current model allows us to do that because we go through AGLC funding and we fundraise on our own to provide victim support. The new model will not allow this. We are not allowed to fundraise. The new regional boards will not be fundraising. All funding will have to come through SolGen, and they will all be used for very specific purposes. And those purposes are, as far as we know so far, court navigation and only court navigation. So a very first response aspect of victim services will be disappearing, and we've had no guidance on how that is supposed to be brought forward. Another thing that we will be losing, we have for the last 10 years provided a victim services support dog. That is, our current dog is Carter, and he takes part in providing support to victims that have a hard time navigating the court system just simply because of the stresses that come along with it. So Carter takes part in interviews with children, with victims that require somebody else there to help them go through what is a very complicated and often very emotional situation. There is no word, and in fact a very negative word from the province in how they're going to handle these victim support dogs. There is no support being given, no funding being given, and because of the model that is now being put forward, there is no vehicle in which we can continue to support these dogs. In fact, they have informed those of us that have dogs to approach other ministries for funding because they will not be funding this. So those are 2 very essential elements of our victim services programming that exists under the current model that cannot exist under what we have been told the new model will look like. This is of major concern to us, and I'm speaking as a representative of the board, not as a representative of my program staff, because they are not allowed to put forward their own personal opinions on this right now because they are still waiting to be rehired into the new positions under the new program. There has been no real transition plan other than being told that at some point they will be approached to undertake interviews to see if they will become one of these new court navigators. The tiers in place for them, so our program staff, we have our program director who comes with more than 25 years of experience. She will be the same as any other court navigator. There are no tiers in the current program to give real respect to the work and the experience that some of our program staff bring with them. They haven't been clear about the funding that is going to be given in terms of pay. They haven't been clear on what is going to be happening in terms of whether or not they will even be allowed to stay in the detachments that they've been working out of. They're not perfectly clear yet on whether or not they will be called. So say there's big incidents happening in Airdrie, which falls into our region, and whether they will be calling on the staff from the smaller municipalities to do it. They have said that they will be operating primarily out of one location and that they will have a big system for providing back support, but it's not clear how that will work exactly. As has been mentioned by CEO Williams, our biggest issue is just a complete lack of clarity. They've been giving us sound bites for the last 6 months, trying to give us some understanding of what's happening, but still we are days away from this new program rolling out, and our people are still completely in limbo as they have been for 2 years. And I don't know that a full impact analysis has been completed to really consider what has been done to the program in all aspects of victim services.
Thank you very much for that information. It almost makes me want to ask you immediately, can you do an elevator speech for advocacy for us to all stay on the same page, especially the dogs? I know Staff Sergeant Wright and myself have attended events annually that give money to dogs, and I'm sure that we can advocate in that area for you for the 24. Otherwise, Rhonda, did you want to speak?
No, I think Miranda covered it.
Very good. Council members, do you have any questions? Councillor Cummings.
Thanks. I'm a little confused. I've been in your position of other societies before, so I'm a little confused about how, as a separate society, because you are a society, right? SolGen can dictate to you in any way whatsoever how you fundraise, operate your society outside of the purview of the use of their funding. So if they have funding that they provide you, absolutely, in any charity that I run, whoever gives me the money can dictate how I use that money. If you're fundraising for yourself, for your own activities, and we'll use your example of the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Commission you're using funds from a charity, casino night or whatever, to set up hotel rooms. I'm confused as how SolGen can tell you not to do that just within the Societies Act alone. I can see how they're saying SolGen is going to be operating a province-wide court navigation system, and that's what we're funding with our money. How do they dictate what you do with your money under your own society? That I just don't understand that at all.
So to speak to that, the way that they're doing that is by dissolving our society. So they're not forcing us to dissolve, but if we decide to continue on, our society will not be operating out of detachments any longer. We would have to set up our own system. We would be losing all SolGen funding. We would be losing our CMP access. We will not be getting files. So basically, we would have to create a secondary parallel society to maintain those functions outside of what is being done by these regional boards. So basically, they're expecting all 62 boards to essentially collapse in favor of these 4 regional boards that will not be doing any of that additional work. They are court-focused only.
Okay, so just for me to understand, so if you want to continue doing all of the work that you're doing today and none of the work that this new organization wants to do, you can continue as you're doing, just without SolGen funding. Now, working out of the detachment's a different situation because SolGen doesn't own the detachment. We own the detachment. The town of Olds owns the detachment. We can say if you work there or not SolGen. I don't see how they have control over that either because they don't own the property. So I'm just logistically, I see where you're going, that if you want to continue with SolGen funding, you have to follow their party line and do what they are telling you to do. If you want to continue doing the victim services job that you've been doing, you have to continue doing what you're doing the way you're doing, just without SolGen funding.
Now, just to be clear that when this happens, so yes, technically we could be doing what we could be doing. But SolGen right now provides each of the 62 units with $150,000 worth of funding per year on 3-year contracts. That is our primary funding to do what victim services. Could we potentially come up with the money to do all the rest of the stuff for AGLC, for the dogs, for everything else? Yes. But we would have to be a society that ran in parallel with, and we wouldn't necessarily be the first call when it comes down to these things because there would be an expectation, as far as I understand, there is an expectation that the RCMP will be calling the court navigators to lead. And so if those court navigators choose not to work with the existing board, if the board continues, then there is no room for us to be invited to the table to provide those supports. So in short, if I can sum up that, if you can give me a second, it's basically they are complicating a system by requiring a 2-tier or a 2-stream system of support where they only now want to work on the court side of things. They do not want to work on what I consider the primary role of victim services.
Information, we'll go with C.O. Williams, and then we'll go to Councillor Wilson and Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And And I know Staff Sergeant Wright's still with us, so if he wishes to stand up and do better than what I'm about to say, feel free, Mr. Wright. But I just want to clarify some of Councillor Cummings' comments. We own the building. For example, none of you and me do not have access to that building because we don't have security clearance. Their contract very much dictates who has access to that building. So let's not, I don't want to say that it's just a rental issue here, but also the fact that files are shared in a very particular manner with very select few individuals. So that entire structure will disappear. It's impossible. It can cohabitate in its current form with what they're proposing as a parallel organization. So again, Warren, if I'm misstating something, feel free to say it, but if not.
Staff, this is Staff Sergeant Wright, standing for those who are viewing.
That's correct. The way it's going to happen is Chinooks Arch Victim Services is going to be replaced by the new provincial entity, which will be most likely one of 4 districts. In our case, it'll fall under Southern District, in which case Chinooks Arch will be out and the new entity will be in. And it is also true that any RCMP referrals will have to go to the new entity. So unfortunately, Chinooks Arch is becoming obsolete.
Thank you for sharing those comments. And then Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Just a brief comment and then 2 related questions. And my only comment is, it seems very short-sighted. My understanding and my information is only based on, Miranda, the information that you just gave here, but certainly seems to be a very short-sighted approach being taken. I'm just wondering, what's the budget for your organization and what's your client intake? How many people are you touching on an annual basis as part of this victim services, if that's a quantifiable number?
Hi, Rhonda Kearns. I can only address our budget, which really fluctuates every year. It just really depends on what we have going on. So we do get that base 150. Now that base 150 is for the units across Alberta right now. That is kind of the cap for, so there are some units that get less than that 150. My understanding is the cities actually get up to 300 per year. So it really just depends on what has happened in our area and yeah. Sorry? Oh, number, that varies as well. So I do, because we run out of 3 RCMP detachments, Old, Didsbury, and Sundre, so all my reporting to the provincial government, I have to separate each detachment. And so when I'm looking overall, we're averaging about 500 files a year, with, of course, domestic violence being our highest caseload.
Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. This is astounding to me. I just don't understand the thinking and going this route. I do have a question with regards to the victim services, and that is it going to be handled by a different department, like under social services or something like that? Because this is obviously something that is well used and needed. And in fact, I used victim services a long time ago when I needed it. So I know that there's a need there.
As far as we're aware, it's staying under the public safety portfolio, so it will be SolGen that still is taking the lead on this. It's just that they are now operating under 4 super boards, 1 per each region, rather than the municipality-based boards. So by centralizing, they're hoping to create economies of scale, I'm thinking.
Thank you. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I want to thank both of you ladies for coming here today and giving us a presentation. Having personally used Chinooks Arch Victim Services on more than one occasion due to tragedy, I know how important your function is within our community, and it's a very necessary tool that we need to have and available to all walks of life and not dictated by perhaps a government entity to tell us what to do from down here. So I think it's very simple that we support advocacy now and do what we can. And I agree with what Mayor Dahl said as far as a short elevator speech on how we can, and perhaps we can connect with some of our surrounding communities as well and get them also on the same advocacy path that hopefully we will choose to do today. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blatz. And now we'll go to Councillor Daly and back to Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Thank you to the committee for the work that they do in the community. As you're aware, I attended the Rural Municipalities Association conference, and this came up at the minister's bench. One of the municipalities did bring this up, and to the Minister of Public Safety, and he did give a very well-spoken, quite assertive talk that he was going to look into the victim services, and he was not going to let it wither on the vine. And so this was brought up on an advocacy level already with the RMA, but I would definitely support this going forward into our Alberta munis and through our connections as well. I couldn't imagine that if this service was not available to our citizens, the impact that it would have. So thank you to the committee, and you have my support.
Yes, thank you for bringing that, Councillor Daly, as well as when we were at the caucus this past week. Out of the 18 ministries, it was talked around the table as well. Now we'll go back to Deputy Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dahl. And I just had a question with regards to that in particular, and thank you, Councillor Daly, for bringing that up at the RMA and telling us about that. The question I would have you done any advocacy on your own with regards to going towards the Alberta Municipalities Association? Have they been informed and brought it up? Are they in the midst of making any kind of statement with regards to that? Or should, and CEO Williams, whether or not there should be some kind of resolution that we could make? I don't know if that's the way you want to go, or even setting up a meeting with the minister or MLA.
Go ahead, CEO Williams. I could also add one as well.
Oh, yeah, and feel free, Mayor Dahl. The Alberta Municipalities does have an official position on this. They are opposed to the regionalization move. And this, obviously, RFD is to add it to council's advocacy. And really, the issue is, I think 2 years ago, we didn't know what we were opposed to. But 2 years later, we still don't have answers. And certainly what just Miranda brings forth with the funding model and the focus on courts instead of, courts and tragedy, and even smaller items, not to minimize the service dogs, but for those victims, especially children who are experiencing crime going through the court system. It can't be understated the strange move just to do nothing. And now I think through our local MLA and again through our local municipal partners, I do believe there's a role to play for everyone.
So on that note, I would, and you're certainly welcome to add to that.
Sorry. We've been in regular contact for the last 8 months with Solgen, asking the questions. I've had myself plenty of conversations with the person who's spearheading this initiative, to the point that the sound bites that they've been putting out, half of them were my questions in the last 6 months. So that was where we've been going, because we've been directing them as this is what we need to know. In terms of speaking out, that has been a really tricky thing for any victim services unit to do. Those who have been most vocal have actually lost funding. In fact, we're in a position now where we've been granted an additional 6 months of funding so that we can continue on through this transition period. And there are a number of very highly outspoken boards that didn't receive that. So it's been a bit of a tricky situation for us to navigate, because without that Solgen funding, we can't operate. We can't pay our staff. So we're all kind of be doing the same thing that you are, the wait and see. And it's an unfortunate situation to be in, because it has muffled us quite a bit. But we're in it now. There's nothing that we can do. We know that we're sunsetting, so now is the time that we are coming to you with rather candid statements.
You've shared very wealthy information with us today. I'm very proud of you for taking a stand and bringing it to our council. I will also note that the mayors of Sundre and Disbury are very spirited with this cause as well. We do now have a mid-sized towns mayor's caucus. This is on our priority list as well, and we brought it to the attention of each of our CAO and his staff for Alberta Munis. I don't think you're going to lose the conversation. So thank you very much today, and I will ask for a motion on the floor for the advocacy to be added to our list. Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Dole, and I'd be happy to put this out, that council moves to add victim services to its advocacy priorities.
Thank you. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. And once again, it's been a privilege to have you share your information with us today. Take care. Okay, we've got our development permits. We've had quite a few people waiting in our gallery, so we'll take I believe we're going to have our development officer up this time, Sherry. Sherry, go ahead and approach the podium, please. This is page 38, please, in your agenda, and that's item 4B. Go ahead, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, CAO Williams, and Directors. This is an application for the property at 4346 47th Avenue, which is currently zoned Industrial Business District. The applicant is requesting that a warehouse of low human occupancy only be approved with multiple variances. For those of you who aren't familiar with low human occupancy, that's defined in the National Building Code as being buildings that can be classified as low human occupancy, which may include pump houses, equipment storage shacks, etc. We're classifying this as low human occupancy because there will be less than probably 50 visits a year and being of less hours than business operations, etc. The application meets the following regulations, which is the definition of low human occupancy and the parcel coverage. The applicant is requesting that the variances be approved by council for the rear yard setback, which is within the 6-meter rear yard setback, which is 3 meters from the rear yard, which is a 50% variance. Variance to hard surface the internal driveway as 100% variance. And this would be to gravel the portion 9 meters from the front property line within the parcel. The on-site landscaping be 100% varied, and the off-site landscaping be 100% varied. The rationale for supporting this is because it is low human occupancy, and these areas will need to be met once the use changes, and it becomes a different use. Admin recommends approval as per the attached conditions with the removal of 2A, which says to allow the warehouse low human occupancy only to be located within the side yard setback. You will also notice that there's a couple of caveats that we're requesting being registered, and that is for the low human occupancy, and that is to protect future buyers or future renters that should they take on this property, change the use, they will have to incur costs and substantial fees in order to operate at a different use. We're also requesting that a caveat be registered for drainage on this site and the adjacent site to the northwest, because the property was graded by an adjacent property owner without discussing and getting the approval from the town of Olds. And so we're trying to work with the applicant to allow him to drain in that direction, which would be to the northwest property, draining across the property, and both protecting him and future landowners in the future for not stopping or obstructing drainage in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Those conditions are very important. I would open the floor at this time if council has any questions. We'll just wait for the legislative clerk. We're good? Very good. I see none, so I'd ask for a motion. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council approve development permit application DP 24-013 as presented, subject to the conditions listed in the attached draft development permit. Should I say as amended because we're removing 2A? As amended? Okay.
Thank you. I like the directions that you have just shared with us.
Thank you
I'll
very
call
much
for
for
the
that.
vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And you'll be staying here for also item 4C, DP 24044, so please move forward. Page 52.
This is an application at 5001 54th Street for the emergency shelter. On the agenda, it does state 57th Avenue, so I'd just like to note that that is supposed to be corrected to say 54th Street. This land use district is considered a medium residential district where an emergency shelter is considered a discretionary use. In discussions with the applicant and his discussions with the safety codes officer, they'll probably be changing the interior to include 6 bedrooms, no suites, the family room and storage areas, so having approximately 30 people in total with kids and children, plus their staff members accordingly. Administration believes that this will not negatively affect adjoining properties of the land or generate noticeable changes in traffic. Administration recommends approval of the permit, subject to the conditions.
Thank you very much, Development Officer, and our ledge clerk will be sure that the agenda is amended to read 54th Street. And I would ask Council at this time, do you have any questions? Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If we can look at item 15 of the development permit, which states access to 54th Street shall only be used in emergency situations or when an expansion occurs. And then if we look at page 55, I know I'm bouncing you all around there, which is the layout of the plan layout. It has the driveway going off into R. Hedges Ball Diamonds, then accessing 54th Street. I have a 2-point question here that the Development Officer might be able to answer. And one, should we change 15 to say direct access to 54th Street? Because they do have access to 54th Street indirectly through the OR Hedges, just for some clarification. And then my other question is why? Why do they not have a driveway on 54th Street? And why do they have to go on to Crown or municipally owned land to exit their property? It just seems a little odd to me, and I'd like some clarification on that.
In discussions with engineering and the layout of that road and the busyness of it, it's been suggested that that location onto 54th Street be directly not impacting the property on a regular basis. Therefore, it's been shifting down to the existing one where it can be shared and there's not more traffic and safety concerns in that area. We are allowing it to stay open should there be emergency requirements or to access the property. And should they have that access there, they would also be required to pave 9 meters of it from the front property line.
Okay, thank you once again, Development Officer. That's an excellent explanation. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you. So is there some place in the development permit then that dictates that not only do they have to pave that section of municipally owned land, they have to maintain that municipally owned part of their driveway in full and complete? Like they have to shovel it, they've got to sand it, they've got to do all of that stuff? Because I didn't see anything about that in there at all. So if they're going to be, nor did I see anything in there that said they had to be required to pave it. I may have missed that, but I certainly didn't see that in there.
Sorry for the confusion there. That would be if that was their main access onto 54th Street, that they would have to pave that portion of the property onto their property. However, since it's only going to be gated and limited access, such as they decide to expand the shelter, then they'll have access then. However, it won't be used.
Sounds like you've done your homework in regards to this. Is this supplemental? Councillor Cummings?
Sorry, I'm still not following this at all. So what I see on the drawing that's on the screen right now is access to OR Hedges campground, or Ball Diamonds, right? That's their primary access on or off their property, which is through a parking lot owned by the municipality, or a pseudo parking lot. I'm not even going to call it a parking lot. It's just a field, basically, with access to 54th Street. You mentioned about paving and gating and all this stuff. Are you suggesting that if in the future they expand, then that 90-degree angle into the campground or the Ball Diamonds will change to a straight out onto 54th Street, and then they'll have to pave that section? Or are you suggesting they'll have to pave the municipal property if they choose to that's where I'm getting a lot of confusion on here, right? Because right now I see them sharing access on an unpaved section of driveway, basically, which is, I think, just dirt or grass. I don't even think it's gravel at this point. So how are we going to differentiate the municipality funding and costing and supporting that roadway for them to access their property, or them paying for and covering the costs of their own access into their property? That's not, to me, that's not explained or covered in any way whatsoever in this development permit, where we're granting them access through a municipally owned property. Maybe I'm not explaining that very well.
I'd just like to clarify that on this drawing, it doesn't show the access I'm talking about that is on 54th Street. You'll see over here where it says access to the Hedges Baseball Diamonds. That is the current access to our site, which they will have access 6 meters from that intersection, which will be gated onto their site. From their entrance onto the property, we're going to relocate a gate back so that our property is still mandated by ourselves. The portion that I was talking about on 54th Street is an existing gate that is more near the intersection of 54th Street and 48th Avenue. But sorry, it was not shown on here, so I think that's where the confusion has come in.
I'm sure our development officer would be happy to sit with you and explain further.
Madam Mayor, my confusion is the drawing shows clearly the driveway goes onto municipally owned land. That's the plan, because that's what's a drawing here, and that's drawing is the plan. So the plan is the shelter will receive or gain access to the shelter through municipally owned property. Who's going to cover the cost of maintaining their access through municipal property onto their property? That's my question, and it hasn't been answered. So I'm just confused about that part. Like, I get it, you're going to make our gate, move our gate in so that they can have access to their property without our gate. So I get that, but
Question is, who's going to cover the cost? Is that your question?
yes, who's
Okay,
going to cover
I'll
the
ask the
cost of
COP.
the municipal,
Thank you.
of this private property entrance off municipal property?
I turn this over to CO Williams.
Sure, and Dr. Pedro can correct me if I'm wrong. Whether it might be 20 meters perhaps of shared use that the municipality, since it's a shared road, the municipality would not look to upgrade that. That would be at the landowner's discretion, but we would continue to maintain it in the same way as we always do. Based on traffic projections, we will still have the vast majority of traffic needs on that shared road. So we have no plans to upgrade it to a hard surface right now, as it's essentially a driveway for both OR Hedges, for the future shelter, and for what's now our new snow dump. We're happy with the way it is, as it's, I guess it's gravel state. I think we do throw some dust suppression product on there once in a while, calcium, for example. But as it currently stands, the town would maintain it as it currently does, because the traffic volume we're anticipating after construction is a fraction of what it receives already from municipal uses. So, Dr. Pedro, is that close enough? Or anything else to add?
Director Pedro.
No, I think that summarizes it quite accurately. At the end of the day, at least from an engineering perspective, we'd certainly look at what future expansions on the property, what kind of volumes that would introduce to both the road and the intersection as well. At that point, we'd make a decision on what needs to be upgraded, if any, and what that cross-section would look like.
Thank you for the information sharing, both CAO and Director Pedro. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dahl. I kind of just going a little bit further along on this roadway. So, correct me if I'm wrong. Do we maintain that in the wintertime though? Like, I thought it was just because I mean we only use it for the ball diamonds in the summer. So now it's going to be used all year. And then we're going to use we've got a snow dump that's going to be going at the back end of that property. So I would imagine we would have to do some kind of maintenance in the wintertime for it, just to be able to access the back end. So what's your feeling in the winter portion of the use for that? Not to say that it's that big a deal, but.
No, good question. And up until this year, you're right, we didn't touch it in winter. We have been maintaining it because we have been using it as our primary snow dump for the uptown clearances. But generally, so let's say it snows on Friday, we don't activate till Sunday or Monday perhaps. If the shelter wants access to there, they will be responsible for getting their own access. We won't be providing that on-call service. But practically speaking, we'll be using that snow dump for the foreseeable future, years and years. So we'll be opening that up on a regular basis once that 7 or 8 centimeter threshold's breached for uptown clearance.
Thank you. Good questions around the table, and I believe you've closed your comments. Very good. I will ask for a motion, please. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council approve development permit application DB 24-044 as presented. I don't believe there's been any amendments, has there?
No
On
amendments.
this
No
one?
amendments.
No. Subject to the condition listed in the attached draft development permit.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. The motion is on the floor. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Once again, thank you for your time, Development Officer Sherry.
Thank you.
We are going to move down to item 5A, page 77, please. This is our Infrastructure Quarterly Report 2024. C.O. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and I'll just turn it right over to Director Pedro, who's with us to lead us through this report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I do appreciate that this is a rather lengthy report, so should Council have any questions, feel free to present them as we go along. So I won't be reading every line, but I will point out sort of the highlights from each section. And starting with our utilities. So as you Council can see, we did add a few rows to our core services and utilities. Main ones being this year, given that it's been in the winter, so we haven't performed any sort of relining or catch basin or utility dig repairs. We've been quite focused on utility assessment and inspection. So we have completed 105 manhole inspections, and this is based on a new procedure that we've put in place. And we have actually put a 60 manhole inspection target per month. And our guys have been quite adamant that they need to jump on board and do this. I will give them a lot of credit here. So they've done 105, and actually to date, that's more like 125. So they're moving right along in that inspection, and that's facilitating that. We are finding issues in manholes, which is allowing us to branch out our investigation and find out where those issues are, which will tie into our I&I issues, as we'll discuss later. The other item I would note is that we've completed 4 water service repairs. Again, this is part of the water loss investigation, an I&I issue, and those have all been completed on 61st Avenue. We have included a picture of one of those repairs. So what we've seen on actually 3 of the 4 repairs are similar breaks like this. So this would be considered almost 50 to 60% break of that line. So we are seeing quite a bit of water coming out of those repairs, out of those service lines. And I will note that once these 4 inspections were completed, we actually did see a reduction in the inflow into one of the manholes in the area. So again, it just goes to show you that inspections are important and we are finding these issues. So we should eventually see this reflected in our water loss numbers and hopefully our I&I numbers as well. So next slide. So utilities, of course, we're keeping council up to date on where our percentages are and where the losses are. The repairs that we've completed were sort of mid to end of February, so you won't necessarily see the numbers change until about March. So hopefully at the next quarterly report, we will continue seeing a downward trend. But yeah, as you can see, the numbers are relatively the same as they have been historically. On the vapor testing side, so our crews again have been pretty proactive in this repair program. We now have just 2 locations remaining, one being the Imperial Road storage yard, and that's obviously dealing with the landowner, and we expect those to be completed in this coming spring. And then one is our own, east of 70th Avenue in the grass area, and that just requires a barrel adjustment. So those parts are on order, and that will be completed in the spring as well. Okay, jumping into the water loss and I&I plan, we did want to provide council with a bit of a list of what the priorities are for each respective issue. Water loss at this point is to do it what we're calling advanced leak detection to determine what the repair areas are. So as I alluded to on 61st Avenue, that was strictly based on doing our assessments, performing leak detection, and identifying where those problem areas are. And so we do have, you will see in subsequent slides, we have two slides showing the zones where we're going to perform advanced leak detection. And this is a slightly different technology than what we would use internally. So it involves setting essentially, I would say, smaller than a puck size sensor that goes into both the hydrant valves and the mainline valves. And those sensors are installed in place overnight. And all that information is gathered and the sensors speak to each other. So essentially what it can do is isolate where a potential leak is. It could determine roughly what the size of the leak is and then get us into that location for further investigation. So this is the one map. So as you can see in the green, section 1, we have completed that already. That section we didn't identify, or sorry, section 2, sorry, in the yellow. We've completed the advanced leak detection in that area. We surprisingly found no leaks in the water system there, so it is what we consider tight. The intent when we bring in the contractor in middle of April is to complete the remaining sections as shown here. So section 1, section 3, section 6, and section 5. And then when we go on to the next slide, also section 4 in the northeast of town as well. The Vistas was also completed back in January when we first discovered that water coming into the one manhole, which had the spray foam around the inlet there. So yeah, it's all good. So that's on the water side. Now moving on to the I&I plan. We've identified essentially 5 priorities. One being the manhole inspections and relining, 2 mainline inspections and relining, 3 is additional smart cover installation, 4 is manhole adjustments, 5 is continue the ongoing initiatives, and we will work through those in the next slide. So manhole inspections and relining, we've put together a fairly comprehensive procedure for performing these inspections. And so we've provided council with a bit of a snapshot of what those inspections look for. We're really outlining, it's essentially a condition assessment. And it does help us assess whether there's either inflow or infiltration into that. And we have identified certain areas in the priority list that we're going to focus on first, and our team is currently working on that right now. Today, like I mentioned, we are at about 125, and out of those 125, we are at 13 manholes that we've identified inflow and infiltration, so those would be placed on our relining program to be completed later this year. So, and priority number 2 is similar idea, again, an entirely new inspection procedure, and this is just looking for any sorts of defects or inflow or infiltration sources in the actual sanitary mains. We haven't completed any of this, as you can't really do camera inspections in the winter. So the issue is once you have essentially a warm piece of equipment gets lowered into a manhole, when you hit that temperature differential, you end up creating a lot of moisture, and you can't really see anything. So this is really going to come into play in the spring here. So hopefully starting, I'm thinking probably middle of April, we'll start to get going on this program, and then this is going to do 2 things for us. It's going to confirm that what we didn't do in 2023 is the actual infrastructure we need to reline, and it's going to identify all of the new sections that we know need to be relined and/or replaced. So, and again, this, sorry, one last thing on this slide. Our target is to have 10 blocks relined by the fall, and we are hoping to do 10 blocks of mainline inspections per month. Now, a block typically is separated into 2 sections of pipe, so next slide. Not always, so it depends if there's a manhole mid-block. Some blocks are just manholes at the intersections. So, priority 3, additional smart cover installations. So this has actually already been completed. So we do have 14 smart covers distributed around the town, and we will be looking at moving probably 4 to 5 of those in the near future. They're quite valuable in terms of this information. It allows us to really isolate where the issues are coming from. And now that we have a good baseline of the entire town, we're going to start focusing in so we can actually work our way upstream to find out where those issues are. Priority 4, so as I alluded to earlier, these are the various manhole adjustments. We are looking at completing about 4 manholes per month to have 20 completed in the fall. We do have currently about, I think it's about 15 that we've identified that need to be raised. We are performing investigations on a few other areas, so I expect that number will increase as we move forward. But we have ordered material for this just in preparation for those adjustments. Next slide. And then priority number 5, just continuing ongoing initiatives. So this is a lot of the administrative work that we were typically doing, just looking at water meter, utility billing audits, that type of thing. And SCADA system upgrades, for example, which is also ongoing at the moment. And then my favorite slide, just trying to present council with a rough estimate of the cost that we are projecting to incur so far. And this is pretty much strictly based on existing priorities. So this doesn't include any sort of initial or additional manholes that need to be lined or repaired, or sanitary main that needs to be lined or repaired, or any sort of water services or water main that needs to be repaired or remediated in any way. So we are already at roughly $826,000. I do expect, and we will have to have a discussion with council at some point once we get further into our investigation, that the $1.5 million that was allocated, I would estimate is not nearly enough to make a serious dent in this issue. But I did want to make council aware of the projected costs we're looking at right now. Any questions on the utility side?
Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Dahl and Director Pato. I think you've started to address, I just had a question around the achievability of the plan, and you touched on financial capital. I'm not sure if human resource capital is also an issue, but if we could go to page 82, just around the timelines, the schedule installed at the beginning of March, I think it was page 82. But we're gently, I know, and you've got the comment in some cases about weather permitting and so on, so the achievability of the plan, we're fairly comfortable with, as a general comment. Yeah, here's the one. It says completed by mid-March. But then when I look at the priority list, it says, well, we've completed section 2. The others work in progress or pending, I guess. So.
Right. So thank you for the question. With the advanced leak detection, it's at least with the April plan, we would do all the sections at once. And so each section would take approximately 2 days to perform, because we come in the one day, install the sensors, leave them in place overnight, and then come back the next day, remove the sensors, download the data, and then move on to the next section. So we're estimating that process for all of those sections would take about 2 weeks. So as far as the leak detection side, yes, I would say this obviously mid-March, we're not completing that because we're obviously past there and the weather didn't permit us to install it in March, but mid-April is the target date now. Now, what comes of those results remains to be seen. So at that point, I would hope and I assume we're going to run into quite a few different problem areas. And so we'd have to prioritize at that point further investigation and any sort of repairs. So, yep. Perfect. So moving on to Public Works, this being winter, our winter quarter, we're not seeing a lot of really any repairs, largely focused on the cemetery digs that our Public Works group performs, as well as doing pothole repairs and snow clearing. So we did want to give council an idea of the amount of hours of contracted snow clearing. It's about 40 hours for this year so far. And we did include pictures of the 2 new box blades in action. They've proved quite useful for us, so we estimate that there's about a 50% reduction in clearing time due to those attachments. So I think they're well worth the investment. Planning and infrastructure side, nothing major to report here, so just the 52nd Street project obviously is on hold until this spring. WSP has been in contact with Ruby Rock, and we do have this project earmarked in their schedule as one of their first ones to complete. So we will certainly hold them to that. 67A Avenue Road Extension, we have started that preliminary engineering, and the 57th and 54th Street intersection assessment, that's been put on hold given the fact that the engineering costs came in quite a bit higher than our initial estimate. And so given the potential development of Miller Meadows to the south, we've decided to push off that assessment to the future. In terms of development approval times, these are our updated timelines for the first quarter. In my opinion, they're relatively quick, and I'm not identifying any major concerns. We are looking at some tweaks internally just to increase this, or decrease rather, these timelines and make things more efficient for applications, but we will be working through those in the future.
Mayor Ryan has a question.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Dolan, through you to Director Pedro. With regards to this, or maybe the CEO, with regards to both of these items here with the development officer and the council, with some of the changes that were being proposed today through the land use bylaw amendments, would that speed things up on both sides of this coin, the council involvement, because we would have more opportunity for the development officer to approve and speed things up on the development officer side, because it's going to be a much clearer picture for them going forward. So I was just wondering if you could tell me whether or not that would be possible.
Yeah, sure, and I see Kyle still here if you want to jump in as well. Certainly with the higher density stuff that we believe is going to be forthcoming, that will expedite things. The larger piece is the land use bylaw review, which is getting underway this year, lasting into next year, with which council funded the first part of it. I think our larger hang-ups, and again, Kyle or Adrian can correct me if I'm wrong, it comes down to variances in direct control districts where a lot of applications get hung up, and I believe Councillor Cummings has brought this up on numerous occasions, and actually it's still in my action item list that we need to get a better handle on our DCs. And I think even the previous council had a presentation from Greg Teal about them and all of that, but I believe from the council purview, those need to be flushed out a bit better. And Adrian, would you say that's where a lot of things get hung up, are the DC approvals and the variances, largely?
I think that's certainly one of the areas, yeah. So I fully expect that to streamline that process.
Councillor Cummings?
Thanks. If we can go back one slide, I think, to the planning and infrastructure section there. The 67A road extension, that's the intersection traveling north or south, right, that we're talking about. I have brought up previously the 67A going into Rotary Athletic Park and the driveway, I guess we'll call it, from, is it 67 Avenue, the very west side, going up into Rotary Athletic Park, that road's not complete. Sorry? 70, whatever road it is, I don't really care. What I care about is the road coming into Rotary Athletic Park and that 67 extension that came because of Rotary Athletic Park, and that road still isn't complete. I've mentioned it before, still haven't received any feedback on whether or not that needs new funding, or if that's included in previous funding and just hasn't been done yet. So is there any update on that part of the road?
Yeah, I do recall you asking about this months ago now, Councillor Cummings, and I didn't follow up, but I did get a better understanding. How we built that road originally, the intention was to allow future development to pay for that second lift of asphalt, which is still the plan. However, it's been now so long that we are risking hurting that first layer and therefore the substructure. But for now, it's still in good shape. Those cornerstone lots, as we call them, north of Walmart, north of the duplexes, they have, if not already, imminently be listed for sale through Cushman Wakefield. And that's the first time they've ever been officially for sale. So we're hoping to get traction on those, as the town also has some fairly heavy development security implications as well in those lots. But the second list of asphalt, I call it Rotary Road. I just like the name. I'm not sure that's the actual name of the road. We are hoping that our plan is to have a developer fund that as part of the broader housing developments that will go in there.
For that clarification.
Okay, moving on. These are the building permit statistics. So we did want to provide council with a comparison to 2023, so we've kept those numbers in there. As you can see, they're lower compared to January and February of 2023. That being said, we do have a number of potential developments coming forward, so I don't expect that this will continue to be low.
Cummings?
Thanks. I'm just looking at these two charts from 2023 and 2024, and I've noticed a difference in the way we're calculating our housing starts between the 2 years, specifically in February. So if we look at 2024 February, in my mind, there's one housing start, not two. And if we look down at 2023, the formula of the mathematics works the same as the way I'm thinking to make that one. Because we did not include commercial numbers. It is simply the number of detached dwellings plus the numbers of multi-units, the number of duplexes as units, and there is only just one. So I'm not sure if that was a typo or if that's a change in the way we're reporting things. And I see Kyle threw his hand up, so hopefully he's got an answer for me.
Mr. Kyle from Municipal Land Use, talk to that.
Thank you. I can speak to that one. That second housing start in February was a secondary suite. And it doesn't really have a column in this chart the way it's laid out right now. So it exists under the accessory buildings / other column, which does not have a units component to it. There was another one actually at the end of 2023, we had said 28 housing starts, and we found one more that added to that after the fact, which is why we're at 29 for that year. So it's I guess a bit of an outdated chart that's been in use for a number of years before secondary suite applications really started to come in, and they're not counted except for me manually knowing that it's a secondary suite and putting it in there.
Thanks for that clarification.
Do you plan to revise that chart now as soon as we're done all our secondary suite information, bylaws, et cetera, et cetera?
I think it could be prudent for us to do that, anticipating an increase in secondary suite applications and wanting proper documentation of it.
Ready's better than not, for sure. Thank you. Director Pedro.
Thank you. So moving on to development permit statistics. So similar idea, just trying to provide council with a comparison between the 2 years. And it obviously is, January is quite a bit lower than January last year, but we expect those numbers to continue. Oops. Next slide. So to our report a problem. So this is just a summary of the operations report a problem. Drainage being the largest issue that we've experienced with 10 complaints there, and that's obviously given all the snow melt that we've occurred. All of those issues have been dealt with to date, and our guys are trying to be more proactive on that. And the second would be the road issues there. Those are largely slippery conditions and the occasional pothole concern there. So, next slide. Recycling extended producer responsibility. So this is one of those issues I think it's sort of in the shadows. Not a lot of discussion on it, but the town has signed up for the extended producer responsibility program through the province, and the important part here is the timeline. So we've been dealing with them quite closely, and there's a series of meetings in order to perform that implementation for next year. So April 2025 is their target date to transition existing services, and then October 2026 would be to add any sort of additional services outside of their current mandate. So we are working with Circular Materials. They are the company that the province has mandated to transition all the municipalities. And so they're handling that program right now. So, next slide. Challenges and solutions. So council will likely note that these haven't changed since the last quarterly report. We are still dealing with the same issues. Challenge number one being water loss and I&I. So we will continue to work on that. Challenge number two, relating to number one as well, budget constraints for continually aging infrastructure. And again, it's going to go a long way with our asset management program there, just to help us define what those needs are. And challenge number three, lack of functional asset management program. So we have made progress on this one. So between finance and the rest of the departments, we are working with Citywide, and work is well underway to implement that program. And we expect that to be in place by September of this year. So we are moving quite quickly in that direction. Health and safety, fairly straightforward. From the infrastructure side, just one incident in the first quarter here. And future needs, these have also not changed much. We did add under top 3 community issues were the flooding events that occurred, and that was mostly just these catch basin backups and the snow melt that we dealt with. So certainly a priority.
Very much. There's kudos to your department on the difference between 23 and this year's 24 so far in incidents. Keep up the good work. Does council have any questions to any further slides at this time? Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just trying to find the slide there. It was the graph of the I&I and water loss table that had the, there it is, page 80. In your total section in the red, is that just the monthly average times 12? Could you explain how you got the 766 and then 1.45 million numbers?
So that was the total for last year. Yeah, so there should be, let me check that. Yeah, so that would be the total for last year. I think we should have probably noted that in that column. But.
Yeah, I was just a little confused as to whether that was your expected total for 2024 or your estimated total. So that's just a recap from 2023 with no expectation of yet what we're going to see in 2024. Obviously, it's a drought season, so hopefully not a huge number.
We hope so. I do apologize for that. That is the 2023 total.
Very good. You had 23 in the other columns, so thank you very much. Very good. I'd ask for a motion, please, to put this on the floor. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move the council accepts the Infrastructure Services Quarter 1 report as presented for information.
And thank you very much for your time, Director Pedro. That was very informational, and also Mr. Sloan for being here with us. And we will move on. In our agenda, oh, sorry, yes, yeah, that's right. We have a motion on the floor right now from Deputy Mayor Ryan, and I will call the vote. Those in favor? That's carry. Okay. We will move on to correspondence and information. Now, our agenda should read 104, page 104. If you want to go to page 104, item 6A. And this is our correspondence and information. Are there any questions to the three items in the agenda on the request for decision? If not, I would like a motion on the floor. Councillor Cummings.
Thank you. I move that the correspondence information report ending March 25th, 2024 be received as information.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Moving down to reports from council boards, committees, and commissions. And this should read page 114. So if you can go to page 114, 7A. The reports have all been received. The only report I would ask for would be from Councillor Walsh, if you would like to give us a report.
Thank you, Mayor. For the month of March, I go back, on March 4th, I did miss our first whole council, the whole meeting, and unfortunately I was out of town. March 5th, our Economic Development Action Committee met. Our Business Retention and Expansion Work Development Committee is planning on getting out a business survey in June. And the terms of reference were approved for our Ag Action Team, our Construction Team, and Access to Capital Team. So again, subcommittees of EDAC that will be working with us in that committee. March 18th and 20th, I did attended along with Councillor Daly, the Royal Municipalities Association Convention. Some interesting breakout sessions. I attended Building Your Municipality, one consulting an engineer at a time. I did find quite interesting and useful information. Another breakout session was Keeping It Together and Introduction to De-Escalation. Didn't find that all that useful, but and then Growing Agritourism was an interesting session, and a group from Central Alberta presented actually, and it was quite well done. Again, the ministry forums, and thank you to Councillor Daly for mentioning one minister's response to this emergent victim services. Wish I'd had this information in my mind when he spoke, but I don't think he was really that forthcoming on how they were going to move forward. And I suspect advocacy would be a strong suggestion here, because most councillors took him to task on this. Or one did, especially when he mentioned that victim services don't need to fundraise. They should be funded appropriately by this. Yeah, he wasn't saying what he was intending to do, so I fully support our advocacy in that. Yeah, the presentations were great. RMA Economic Development Micro Grants was quite interesting, how RMA help communities with their micro grants up to 10,000. And the other interesting was the Royal Health Professionals Action Plan. I found that interesting. March 20th, I attended the Olds Municipal Library AGM. Because of the snow, it was very quiet and low-key, so that was good. And March 21st, I attended the Parkland Regional Library Services Advocacy Committee in Lacombe. Main topic there was ROIs for counties. See if we can provide the counties the same information we provide municipalities when it comes to libraries. Well, that's it.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions to any information, I'd ask for a motion. Yes, Councillor Cummings?
Thank you. If I could just bring up one event that was in my package. just because it's timely, Tuesday, April the 23rd, the Chamber is hosting a RCMP Site Security Conference or meeting. Staff Sergeant Wright and his staff are going to be coming to the Legion to have a discussion on how not just businesses, but focus on business, of course, but businesses and persons can better prepare their site to prevent property crime. It was something that was brought up by us here at Council, and they've taken immediate action on this one. So you can check out the Chamber website if you'd like, but it's at the Olds Legion, Tuesday, April 23rd from 8:30 to 9:45, and registration is restricted in numbers, so if anybody's interested in attending, please contact the website.
It's PM or AM?
Sorry, that's AM.
And you were putting a motion on the floor, Councillor Daly, or you would like to add?
Sorry, thank you, Mayor Dahl. I just wanted to add to Councillor Walsh's on the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Stay tuned. There will be a major announcement coming forward from our Economic Development Officer here, and so you'll see some invitations going out. And also the questionnaire is under review right now, but will be coming out to our business community to help us establish a baseline of where we are in our community and what the needs are for our economic development team to work with as well. And then, as Councillor Walsh has mentioned, we did approve the terms of reference for the contractors as well as for the Agriculture Advisory Committee, and they will be looking for applications for contractors to apply to be on that committee as well. So we got some big things coming up in economic development, so stay tuned.
Tuned to the right channel. Looking forward to it. Motion, please. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that the reports from council, authorities, boards, committees, and commissions ending March 25th, 2024 be received for information.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. And our last item on our agenda, this will read page 124. That's page 124, 8A. And I'll turn this over to our CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. A few items in open session, then a few more in closed for my CAO report. First thing, I believe was mentioned in some of the councillor reports, but two recent meetings attended by myself and some councillors. First was 2 Fridays ago in Edmonton with Jason Nixon, Minister of Seniors and Housing. We brought forward some issues regarding provincial properties in Olds, some issues with Olds College and opportunities with Olds College, I actually should say, and then of course with Mountain View Seniors Housing. And it wasn't all of, asking for favors or funding. We actually did say thank you for some fairly impressive moves in the provincial budget this year around seniors housing and how that's funded. So I think that was a great meeting with Mayor Dahl, Deputy Mayor Ryan, Councillor Blatz, and myself attended. And the other one was this past Friday with Chinook's Ed School Division. Like Olds College and like Mountain View County and our many volunteer groups, our school divisions, both Chinook's and Red Deer Catholic are important community partners. So it's nice post-COVID to reestablish some of those more annual formal meetings and discussing where the school division's going and where the town's going to service growing population and ongoing capital needs in our existing facilities. I know I sound like a ineffective salesman, but Mountain View Powers is March 1st rates have reset now, and if you also been following the news, the carbon tax is due to reset at the end of this week to a higher ratio of your money. So Mountain View Power rates, March 1st were the new ones, pre-carbon tax. I encourage people to check those out. You can lock in for 3 years for under 12 cents on the electrical side and under 5 on the natural gas side. So quite competitive, and we all know where the money goes, to all good things. Back to the provincial budget. If you didn't notice, the we got some good news in both of our highways. For Highway 2A was funded for 19 kilometers of paving from south of Bowden all the ways to our roundabout, so that's much in need. We had discussed this with Alberta Transportation last fall, and they're also being so generous to do some accessibility work on the sidewalks at the intersections of 2A and 27, which they generally don't do, but we've had troubles with the lack of ramping there for mobility, people with mobility issues. The other thing is the interchange design on Highway 2 and 27 was funded for about $2.1 million. So that's basically funding to design and do preliminary engineering on the Highway 2 and 27 interchange. This has been 20 years in the making. It's been on council's advocacy radar certainly since I've been here, but also I think kudos is owed to current and past councils who kept this going, and Mountain View County as well. I think it's even based on our OFD's response rate to that overpass. It's well overdue for safety concerns, but also as the town grows and the county grows out there into Natook Crossing industrial development. That's great news. Long time coming. And the last thing, also high related, I did mention several months ago we're doing a signalization study. Actually, Transportation's doing a signalization study on Highway 27 to determine the efficiency of the traffic lights. That was supposed to be done by early March. It is delayed till the end of April, but I promise you it still is coming, and we're working with those AT consultants to get that done. And that's all I had.
That's good. Are there any questions to our CAO and his report? Thank you for sharing those important items. That's very good. At this time, I'd ask for a motion, please, to accept the CAO report. Councillor Cummings?
I move that the Chief Administrative Officer report be accepted for information.
Thank you. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming today, Doug. We will be going into a closed session, and I would ask for a motion to move into a closed session, please. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that we move into closed session at 3:11 with all present, CAO, with all present excluding the gallery.
Thank you, and that'll be for Section 16, disclosure harmful to business interests, Section 24, advise from officials, a water commission update, and Section 24, once again, those are the two sections that we'll be dealing with. Section 16, yes, will be are you here to continue? Okay, thank you. Good. There's 4 items, is that correct? 2 sections, Section 16, Section 24. Very good. And I will let you all know, please, when we go to a closed session for continued participation in the virtual council meeting, please stay on the line in the live stream meeting platform, and the meeting stream will be replaced by a graphic and music will play. When the music stops, the meeting will be reconvened. If you choose to shut down your live stream, please watch the Town of Old social media feeds where we have all our information. May I have a motion, please, then, to move into closed? It's been from Councillor Daly, and I will now call for the vote. All in favor? That's carried.